Thanks, Tim. It's great to be here. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So just want to start off with, really a bit of background on where the demand for online education is coming from around the world. Now, we're hearing a lot about, technological change, companies digitizing, upskilling, the relevance of universities and colleges. But really what's happening is that there's a huge shift around the world to people working more digitally, upskilling themselves, and countries really looking at increasing productivity. And what we're seeing is that wherever you go, a vast majority of people are willing to completely retrain or upskill to remain employable. And this is what's driving demand for education. It's driving demand for formal education, such as degrees, but it's also driving demand for online education in the form of lifelong learning. And this is a trend that's been occurring prior to COVID-19, but it has been accelerated by COVID, and it's here to stay. And in many ways, it's now accelerating even more this year. Next slide. So what Open Learning does to capitalize on this trend is we provide an all-in-one solution that enables education providers to move online. You can, around the world, there's hundreds of thousands of education providers. In Australia, we have universities, colleges, corporate training. Across Southeast Asia, many universities and colleges as well. And a lot of them have been running courses face-to-face, or even if they were online, they're run in sort of more of a remote learning fashion, using things like Zoom, like we're doing now. And that's okay for online, some sort of discussions or, small group work, but that doesn't replace a complete platform that enables education to be delivered in a much more collaborative, engaging, and project-based way. So Open Learning is a platform designed around the principles of social constructivism, which really just means that people learn best by doing. So it's learning by doing, it's peer learning, collaboration, strong sense of student support and engagement. And the Open Learning platform has all the tools for running courses like that. A course could be anything from a short course, say 1 hour long, all the way through to an online degree. Now, in addition to actually running the courses themselves, Open Learning has all the tools for an education provider to build a complete education business. Now, that means everything from launching a small website that even shows you, which courses the institution is offering, how they're packaged up in terms of degrees, micro-credentials, different programs, all the topics available, all the way through to handling the enrollments into those courses, collecting payments, and then even issuing micro-credentials and certificates to those students when they complete, and producing a portfolio of learning. So in many ways, as education providers move online, it's a similar trend to what we've seen with a lot of retailers over the past decade moving into e-commerce. And Open Learning is one of the leading platforms doing this in Australia and Southeast Asia. So in many ways, it's sort of, in some ways like a Shopify for online education, but handling everything in a much more focused and research-backed way. So that includes everything from the Open Learning platform, OPENCREDS, which is a micro-credential framework that we've developed, and our marketplace for education. Next slide. So over the past year, and this is our FY20, so Open Learning is on a calendar year basis, we've grown our gross sales from about 1.9 million to 2.8 million, so an increase of 48%. Just 18 months ago, we switched to a software as a service model for our platform, and we've grown software as a service recurring revenue by 42% in the past year. Now, Open Learning actually, for some history, has been around since 2012. But for the first 5 or 6 years, we actually made the platform available for free to everyone in the world to build up the use cases, generate credibility amongst the institutions, show that we can actually deliver really high quality education online that competes with what you might get face-to-face and on other platforms. And that's enabled us to start monetizing that in a range of ways. So we've done that initially via software as a service and also through services and a revenue share on some courses being sold. But over the past year, our cash receipts also grew by 42% to 3.1 million, and we've increased the number of paying SaaS customers on the platform by 169%. And this includes everyone from some of the top universities in Australia to small education providers working with corporates. We now have over 2.7 million students on the platform and 4.4 million enrollments. Next slide. So our clients cover everyone from the university and higher education sector through to vocational education, corporate training and development, and industry associations. Now, the use cases are a little different depending on the institutions, but we are seeing a huge shift towards lifelong learning, which we consider to be short courses and micro-credentials targeting that upskilling segment of the market. At the same time, we also have some really high quality, high value programs that are running on the platform. Everything from short qualifications that might lead into a university degree through to complete online master's degrees. And some of our key clients include the University of New South Wales, Australian Catholic University, who's also a strategic investor in Open Learning, and a number of other institutions across Australia, Malaysia, and Southeast Asia. Next slide. Now, one of the ways that we look at how we capitalize on these fundamental changes that are occurring in the higher education sector is by looking at the value that Open Learning generates for these institutions and what the best way is of capturing that and actually growing the revenue of those institutions as well. So initially what we've started off with and what you've seen over the past year and a couple of years is our platform software as a service model and services. That's something we started a couple of years ago. On average, in Australia, we get about $20 per user per year from that model. Now, in that model, we don't actually get involved in building the courses. Institutions build the courses, but we provide support and things like that. So that's a really scalable, high value software as a service model. But that's just a tiny fraction of the value that we're creating for institutions as they move online. So mid last year, we introduced OPENCREDS, which is a micro-credential framework aligned to the Australian qualifications framework and focused on everyone from universities to vocational to industry associations. Now, in that model, we've partnered with Open Universities Australia and a number of universities around the country to start building out OPENCREDS. And these OPENCREDS are very short online courses that might sell for anywhere from $250 to say $500. And in that model, for many of those, we're getting a share of the revenue when we fund those. So we expect about $75 per user per course when those courses are sold. Now, the next phase, which we've already started signing agreements around, which you would have seen late last year, and I'll go into a bit more, is around actually building entire qualifications or high value programs on Open Learning, but Open Learning actually getting a share of the revenue in those. So under our software as a service model, we have a lot of institutions running these kinds of courses, but they've been built by the institutions with our support on a fee-for-service basis. But now we're actually investing in building some of these programs alongside our customers, and that's allowing us to capture a share of the revenue and support the ongoing running of those programs. Under that model, we can expect upwards of $500 per student per course or per program in that model. And some of the latest deals we've signed are far in excess of that. Next slide. So in the micro-credential space, OPENCREDS, which you can find on our website, it's available for anyone to download. It's a framework that explains how a university, a higher education provider, a vocational institute, or a training company can actually run short online courses that can stack up to something larger. They can get different micro-credentials out of these courses. They can add them together, and maybe they'll lead towards credit towards a diploma or an online degree. And to accelerate the growth of this market, because we really believe that OPENCREDS can become a standard for Australian education providers, we've partnered with both Open Universities Australia to launch a grant program where we're jointly funding the development of these courses. And we've also launched the OPENCREDS Investment Fund, where we're funding the development of OPENCREDS with a range of higher education providers. Now, many of these are already available. We're already building out dozens of courses. Some are already available for sale, and we're already seeing people purchasing those courses online. It's early days, but we can expect a lot more from micro-credentials in 2021. Next slide. Now, one of the big projects that we signed on to last year, October last year, is a partnership with UNSW Global to deliver a transformative online program that gives students direct entry. This is international students, direct entry into UNSW. So this is a 4-month program that students will do if they just miss out on the entry criteria into the university. This is a program that was previously running face-to-face. And when it was running face-to-face for the past 15 years, it received very good reviews from the students. Many students have gone through this program. But when COVID hit last year, it had to be moved online. And when it was initially run via Zoom, while that was a good experience, we wanted to take it a step further. So with this program, we're redefining how online programs can be delivered. Rather than having video lectures and tutorials and exams and things like that, this is all project and activity based. It has a heavy emphasis on student mentoring and coaching. It has regular feedback and continuous assessment from teachers, but it also has interviews at the end instead of exams. So this could actually become a benchmark or a new way of delivering online programs. On top of that, because we're partnering with the university to run it, we receive between $6,000 and $9,000 for every student who goes through the program. Now, our responsibility is building and delivering it. UNSW Global's responsibility is marketing and quality assurance, and issuing the certificate to students at the end, and it's branded as UNSW Global as well. So that program, we've already completed the development phase, and the first intake launches at the end of this month. Next slide. Now, open learning has grown around the world, but we really see ourselves focusing on the Australia and Southeast Asian market. We believe that between Australia, Southeast Asia, and a bit further into China as well, there are significant flows of both international students, but also Australian institutions have great brand recognition across these markets. Now, in Malaysia, open learning is the #1 platform for higher education in the country. We have over 70 universities, colleges, and education providers there on the platform. And now we're recently signing up more institutions in Indonesia as well. So we're going to be expanding a bit further in this region, but our core markets at the moment are Australia and Malaysia. Next slide. Now, one of the key things to understand about open learning is that the open learning platform and open learning's approach to education is both cutting edge, but also backed by decades of research. So this socially constructive approach is the next evolution for education, and particularly online education. There are universities now across Australia and around the world who have put in their strategy to move towards socially constructive education. Many have done it face-to-face, and now they want to do it online as well. So the open learning platform is designed for all levels, all types, all philosophies, but in particular this one, which relies heavily on group work, collaboration, project-based learning, and capturing all of that evidence automatically, all that data, and putting that into a portfolio that can then be used to see if the student has met the outcomes that you wanted to in the beginning. So not only does it provide superior education outcomes, but it can also provide even more data for an employer, for example, to verify if the student has met the outcomes that you wanted. Next slide. Now, we're backed by a very experienced board of directors. Kevin, our chairman, also chairman of ICS Global, David Buckingham, the former CEO of Navitas, a lot of experience in both technology and the education sector, Spiro Papas, who has experience both in the finance sector, but also a great passion for education, Maya, who joins us from Singapore as independent director, and she's the VP of APAC for Twitter, and Beverly Oliver, who's a professor and the former Deputy Vice Chancellor of Education at Deakin University, and one of the leading experts in Australia on micro-credentials. So I'm really honored to be supported by this board, and for the past year and a bit since we've listed, they've guided the company through both COVID and into some of the fantastic projects that you've seen us sign recently. Next slide. I think that's all for me. Very happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Adam. I think there's probably a misconception in the market that you're an education provider, not a technology platform. How does your technology compare to what's on offer from the universities?
So the universities use our technology. And I think this is what's interesting in that in many cases, you see institutions or universities going to market with online courses. Now, these days, very few universities would even attempt to build their own technology and tools to do that. Obviously, there always might be some that do, but open learning is one of the key platforms they use. In terms of how we compare, let's say, to the learning management systems that institutions might be using, you can think of those as very sort of old school enterprise systems, very rigid, really focused on delivering documents and videos and things like that. They don't actually create that learning environment. They don't capture all the evidence of learning. They don't let you structure peer-to-peer collaboration. In many ways, it's like comparing the forums, like the old web forums that we used to use, to social media and a lot of the apps we use today. It's night and day.
And can you explain the typical revenue profile of one of your partners and how that changes over time and what's the key driver of that profile?
Yeah, sure. So let's say an institution. Now, an institution could be a small college or it could be a large university. So for us, let's say a small institution can actually sign up now through our website online, pay with their credit card on a usage-based plan. Those usage-based plans are based on the number of students that are actually doing the courses on open learning that are being run by that institution. And that starts off at about sort of $300 a month for an institution for, say, 500 students. So quite reasonable, quite low cost. But from there, it can increase based on usage. So if they get to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 students, the price grows from there. For universities and larger education providers, it starts off at about $50,000 a year for 5,000 students. So when we work with a large education provider, there's a lot more support that they need. They won't go through our sort of self-service, more B2B SaaS online model. They'll go through more of an enterprise approach. And with those institutions, we can provide a lot more support. But that starting price for the platform is about $50,000 a year. On top of that, we also charge for our learning services where we help them design and build courses. The other model might be that, we sit down with the university and we think, okay, there's an opportunity in this particular sector for this particular program, and we jointly fund that and do it on a revenue share basis.
So the kind of, there's a question here, does the return scale benefits come from a particular customer expanding its use of services or from an increasing number of users of that service? So it's probably double.
Yeah, I guess it could be both in the sense that a lot of institutions will sign up with us and then their usage will grow over time as they build out more courses. So we've had universities, for example, that start off, with 10 courses on the platform, and then a year later they're up to 50, and they've got 3 times as many students as they had before. At the same time, what you've seen in our customer numbers is that we have signed up a large number of institutions or customers over the past year, and many of them are actually small. They're just starting out, but we expect them to grow significantly over time.
And there's a last question here on COVID. Obviously, can you talk to how it impacted the business in 2020 and what that might mean in the future?
Yeah, so what we saw last year was a few things. One was an acceleration towards online education, but that acceleration, I think, is more in the way of people being more aware that online education actually is a viable option for both degrees and lifelong learning. So greater awareness and acceptance of online education is one thing we've seen. Second, for the company, we have seen a lot of institutions look at accelerating their short course and micro-credential programs because these courses will typically target the domestic audience. So previously, a lot of focus went into on-campus education for international students. Now they're looking at, okay, how do we cater towards the working professionals in the Australian market, in the Malaysian market, in the Singaporean and Indonesian markets? So it's accelerated that because that could generate new revenue for these institutions that they didn't have before. The third impact it had for us is that it's meant that universities have been more willing to partner with specialist companies like Open Learning, who have both the technology and the educational expertise to design and deliver programs online, not just on a fee-for-service basis, but on a revenue share basis. So that UNSW global program that starts this month with students is really transformative because that shows that a full-time 4-month-long program that provides direct entry to one of the top universities in the world can be delivered not just online, but in a way that will produce incredible outcomes and that will be used as a benchmark or a standard for future programs.